Now, I do have some written questions here, and we'll also call on people from the floor if perhaps you didn't have a chance. I've got a lot of different things here. You know, the most common question here is the one on voter ID, Bill. And you might want to address that. A lot of people are concerned about that. They feel that's a critical issue.
Can I just do something right before that? Because I neglected to get to one thing I did want to mention in terms of the future. And I know there's many members of my party who say concentrate on fiscal issues, and they're important. Affordable government is a goal of ours. Jobs are a goal of ours. But in the end, we have to address social issues too, because as much as we can address fiscal issues and put reforms in place, to the extent we have a weak culture, to the extent we have families that are weak, we're going to have a government that has to intervene, and a government that is going to be much larger than we want. And therefore, for many of us, we look for opportunities to strengthen the family in our legislation. We look at legislation that in the past has perhaps weakened our families. For me, one of the areas that things that occurred over the last couple of years that weakened the family was the redefinition of what marriage is from what has been the case for centuries, for millennia, which is marriages between a man and a woman. And the importance of that is not that I just have a sensibility that I don't want it expanded to be encompassing other relationships because it just offends my ears. It's not that at all. It's because if we define it other ways, then we're weakening the family, and we're weakening that unit of our society, that foundation of our society that is so important in having a society that works. And so there will be a bill that comes up to return to the traditional definition of marriage. I will be supporting it, and I hope it passes. So I want to get that, in front of all of you because it is important and there will be a debate. I know I'll answer the question. I appreciate that, Pat. My first committee when I was in the legislature was the Election Law Committee. And when I was there, we worked on various measures to bring integrity back to, or strengthen the integrity of our voting system. One of them was voter ID, even then. And even then, we didn't have the support we needed among our own party, let alone the Democrats, to get this done. Because there is, I think, a natural, and I think sometimes laudable, sentiment on the part of representatives, which is, before I solve a problem, show me the problem exists. Don't ask me to legislate on theory, but ask me to legislate based upon reality. And for many of us, voter fraud was a reality. We watched a lot of people from other states coming in and voting in our elections because of our loose definition of what it meant to be a resident, or as they refer to it in the voting laws, domiciliary for voting purposes. We thought that, if it was a technical fraud, voted on fraud, diluted our ability to control our destiny through elections. And we also looked at how open it was in terms of your participation, individual participation as a voter. You could just walk up and say, I'm Bill O'Brien, and they give you a ballot. That always struck me as unnecessarily loose. But we couldn't get it done 6 years ago, 8 years ago when I was first in. The last couple of terms after that, we had the Democrats who were in control of the legislature, and their philosophy seems to be that any control on voting is a disenfranchisement of somebody. I'm not quite sure who, but they would try to remove all controls, and they certainly weren't for a photo ID requirement for voting. So that moves us into this current legislative session. During this legislative session, we passed a bill that I thought was very well thought out. Representative Bates is head of the Election Law Committee in the New Hampshire House this term. his committee did a lot of work on and came up with, I think, what was a very elegant solution to some of the objections. Some of the objections, I think, are fairly attenuated. But, you know, the objection that people can't afford to get identification. You know, it costs $10 if you're not a driver to go to the DMV and get a non-driver's photo ID. So they put in place an affidavit, just say, I don't have $10, so you can sign it and then give you an ID. They really bent over backwards to try to make this an accommodating law that would add integrity, that would have, if it was in place, prevent what we saw in these videos, which is somebody walking in and I've seen the video where they identify themselves as a voter or just mention the name of the voter. I'm not going to prejudge whether what they did was fraudulent, but I will judge our own system, which shows how loose it was, and it would have been prevented. And Governor Lynch vetoed that. He vetoed it, repeating, in essence, in a long veto message, the mantra that I've heard now for 8 years, which is, move along now, there's no fraud here, nothing to see here. And that was Governor Lynch's mantra in his veto message. It was a Senate bill, went back to the Senate first for a veto override, and we could get a veto override in the Senate. I think that whatever we think of these individuals who were involved in Project Veritas, that they've done our state a favor. They've done a state a favor in showing that there are fundamental flaws and weaknesses in our election system, our voting system, and we need to address them. I think they've given the impetus to the legislature to do that. I hope, for our sakes, that Governor Lynch is embarrassed now by his veto, and that he will not stand as an obstacle in what had been a strong majority sentiment even before this video came out to address those problems. We have to address who is voting, we have to address, in terms of individual identification, we have to address what groups are voting. And I think we have to make sure that it's residents of New Hampshire who vote. And I trust we'll be getting some great bills out of election law to allow us to do that. Bill?
Crop TV.